Hello and welcome to a brand new installment of Nintendo News Report for Sunday, March 31st, 2019. We will warn you now, there are April Fool's jokes already because of time zones.
Yes.
QB and Kirby switching is really cute, and that's the only one we're going to acknowledge. I'm Donald Terriel, joined here with an international flavor this week. Joining us is Mr. Don Koopman. Hello, Don.
Hello, everybody. Hey.
Yeah, so it's been a really busy week for news here. Just a little bit of what we've been playing, first of all. I've been playing Baseball Stars 2 a lot. I reviewed that game for NWR. It's on the review is on the site now.
Mhm.
Um, and I mentioned in the review that there's some pretty bad rubber banding.
Uh-huh.
I didn't realize how bad it was until I got to the the final boss of the game, which is essentially you win. You're playing the leagues, 15 games in a row. You win all those. You go to a final playoff against a team from the other league, like in
Yeah.
most baseball tournaments, and you end up in. And it turns out that they are really good. In fact, they can basically hit home runs on demand.
Huh.
So I ended up having a game. The final score of my championship game was 25-15, which is incredibly high scoring for a baseball game, and that involved basically save scumming a
Hmm.
baseball game
Yeah.
because SNK can't resist making the final boss a real pain in the you know what, even in a baseball game.
Well, it's not nothing if it's an SNK game with a terrible final ending.
Yeah. And then once you get through that, it's like, oh yeah, here's the credits, congratulations, you're the champions, and then back to the grind you go, I guess.
That sounds pretty much accurate as I remember SNK being sometimes.
Yeah, basically.
Yep.
All right, but so like I said, more on the baseball stars on the site. But Don, you've been playing a couple of interesting things here. One interesting in a really bad way.
Yes. So let's start talking about Xenon Racer. Yeah, this game is notorious for spawning videos of people comparing the trailer from Nintendo's YouTube channel to the actual game, and it doesn't hold up particularly well. But to be fair, that is the least of that game's problems because on its own merits, that game is not good looking. It has a lot of pop in. Like even the signs that tell you where you need to go are across the track, those pop in until you are very close to them.
Oof.
Additionally, the controls aren't too great. They feel immediately off from the moment you start playing. Sometimes, because you have to press B once down to do the drifting, sometimes it doesn't recognize it instantly for some reason or another. And then, at the same time, like the slipstream to do corners seems incredibly small, like very, very tight. And it's very unusual for how a racing game should be. Because especially when you do a drift, like the raceway needs to be more open and clear, but it definitely doesn't seem that way. In addition to those problems, it seems that the game is more optimized for separated Joy-Con than they are for the Pro controller.
That seems incredibly weird considering, they would be going, they're designing for the Pro controller on the other platforms essentially.
Yeah, it's clear that they didn't test that. Um, Also, don't think it changes the imagery when you look at the control options. It basically stays on Joy-Con instead, even if you're using a Pro controller. Um, Even more, um, the rumble is also off in a weird way. So, in a good racing game, let's say Forza Horizon 4 or a Ridge Racer game, the rumble would go if you would make a turn. So you know where the slipstream is going, so you know where you're landing, basically. Um, the rumble in Xenon Racer only activates on collision.
That's so you're never going if you're driving right, you're never going to feel that rumble.
No.
Okay.
Yeah. So there are a ton of problems with that game. It's without saying that I don't really recommend playing it on Switch. And I wish I could say otherwise, but really, when it comes down to it, this game is not really good. They already said so as much. They're gonna try fixing it with updates, and it went as far as some outlets not even receiving Switch codes at all anymore because the initial reaction was that bad.
Like, what did they do? Send them other consoles, basically?
Yeah, they're just focusing away from Switch and now it's only sending out other consoles or Steam.
That's bad.
Yeah. Um like I reached them out for a reaction, and what they came up with is basically saying from, look, we get that it's not good. We're gonna look at making it better, but it will never be up to snuff of other systems, which I accept. It will never be on up to date to the other systems. That's okay, but it needs to be decent first, and it's not right now. Not even by a long shot. So yeah, avoid because it's $50.
It's busted, basically, and we need to see dramatic proof that it's been fixed
Yeah,
before it'd be recommendable.
yeah, basically. And I play a lot of racing games. Once again, I play a lot of Forza Horizon. I play a lot of um o- o- other things like basically Mario Kart, Ridge Racer, what have you. I like playing a racing game. This is the first time I just felt bad playing it. It bummed me out really hard.
Like,
So
you almost want them to port Split Second, even though that studio's been dead for almost a decade now.
yeah, basically. But yeah, that's Xenon Racer. Don't buy it.
And so, from something that's something that's not recommended even for Chiron to something that's good but maybe somewhat lacking in content is the impression that I'm getting about Power Rangers Battle for the Grid.
Yeah. So it is $20, and I'm not gonna say necessarily that's a bad thing, because you need to set your expectations to a certain level, and I think $20 is okay. But obviously, the main problem with Power Rangers Battle for the Grid, it needs more characters because the mechanics themselves are really, really good. Like they are made with a specific niche in mind that loves Marvel versus Capcom, and it feels extremely Marvel versus Capcom esque in the best ways possible. Like it's really, really fun, and all the characters feel very well balanced. They clearly took a long time tweaking them. Um, they aren't all from maybe the canon that all the people are familiar with. Like for example, there are 3 or 4 characters from Mighty Morphin, like the original series, but they also spread it out over a bit more. And they made a few interesting choices along the way. For example, so I am very much into. I know I'm very well aware what people think, like the actual Power Rangers fandom thinks about certain series. They included the character from one of the worst rated series among fans, which is Power Rangers Super Mega Force, which was pirate themed, and they included a character from that specific series, which is interesting for reasons that are clearly obvious if you ever watch clips of that, because it's literally the worst acted series of the Disney era of Power Rangers. Uh, Outside of that, it's also they include a few characters from the comics, which the comics are really good, but if you don't know them, you go kind of like, huh? So the characters they included are a bit over the place, but that being said, all of them play really well. They combine well with each other. And once you get a string of moves together between the various 3 characters and their ultra Zords, it's really satisfying to play. And arcade mode is really fun. I went through it with almost all the characters now. And the online mode is actually really well. Like the netcode for some reason is just really strong in that game.
I wonder if they're using something like GGPO for that, because it seems like they're going a long way to making this a serious fighting game, even though it only really has 9 characters at the start for a 3-on-3 game.
Yeah, and that's likely the biggest knock against it. I really wish it had more characters. Other than that, I really enjoyed it. And I'm really interested in seeing where they're taking. They already released the season pass for it, so obviously they're going to add more characters and skins and what have you. I just think they should have added 3 more characters right from the get-go.
Yeah, and their arcade mode in that kind of game can't last very long. Like, there's only so many ways you can mix and match this.
Yeah, because there's only 9 characters, so obviously you're running into duplicates once or twice. Arcade mode is not necessarily super long, but it's noticeable enough. So it really comes down to the online and versus against friends, and in that specific way, it is actually really well made. Like, it's actually a proper well made fighting game, but it just lacks a little bit, and I think that's the biggest shame about it. If it had just a little bit more content, I would recommend it easily to anyone. Right now, it's more in that niche that you either need to really like the Marvel vs. Capcom playstyle, or you must really like everything within the Power Rangers canon. Either way, you'll be really good with that. But outside of that specific area, um, I would wait until you know what they do with that season pass.
Hopefully, the base of it does well enough that they have incentive to keep supporting it longer than just what's in that season pass. Because even if they double it, there's still a few. There's a lot of Power Rangers to go through, and you're not going to please all the fans. But you can at least try to get as many as possible.
I mean, once again, I'm surprised they used a character from one of the worst rated Power Rangers series, but not from all the other good ones.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's their game, it's their choices. I just think they could have made some different choices, even within that 9-character roster. Once again, even though they play all really well.
So, anything else you've been playing this week, Don? Or
this is a Switch. I play a lot of games on this.
Well, there's a lot of games on Switch right now. I think there were 35 last week.
I played what was it, Lyrica? Lyrica. That game is really, really fun. It's touchscreen only, so if you like rhythm games but like using buttons, you're basically out of luck. But basically the style of it is very much Chinese poetry. Like the science and how everything is portrayed is really, really fun. And like the text of the actual songs, it's not going to be in the language you're likely going to understand, most people who are listening to this, but in Japanese or in Korean or Chinese, whatever these songs are, and these are jazz, rock, pop, whatever, they will actually showcase the text in the bubbles while you're popping them or sliding them across. It's a really, really strong art style. It's really, really fun. But yeah, that's it. That's the most interesting things I really played this week. Outside of I jokingly played Fun Animal Park.
Because you can't really play that any other way.
Yeah, jokingly, because it's really not a good video game. But yeah, that's basically what I played this week.
All right. So with that, we'll jump into the news here, and there was quite a bit of news this week. Most of it centered around the fact that that PAX East happened, which, although surprisingly light on announcements, there were 2 big ones for Switch. Gearbox, in their, shall we say, interesting panel at PAX East, they announced that they were going to bring Bulletstorm to the Switch. That's the 2011, I believe, first-person shooter developed partially by Epic, but also by a Polish firm called People Can Fly. Extremely violent, and the Switch version is going to contain all the DLC. Unfortunately, we mean all of the DLC because Duke Nukem's playable.
Yes.
And he seemed to be getting more marketing than the actual main character of Bulletstorm, because they're calling this version the Duke of Switch. So that'll be out in I believe they said late July for that one. So it'll probably get stomped by three houses, but they're trying. Although
Yeah.
I'm kind of disappointed that they didn't dust off that Vita version of Borderlands 2 and try to get that running on a system that can actually handle it.
Remember that Sony actually promoted that with the PlayStation Vita 2000?
Weren't they selling it like that was the big bundle with the Vita 2000, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, and it turned out to not run very well.
Yep.
Putting it mildly. And also they announced a whole bunch of Borderlands remasters and Borderlands 3. And then Randy Pitchford went up and did a magic trick, which took about 18 minutes too long.
That's how I remember them. I also remember them as being a big liar. So, because I was for context and why I keep repeating this because I've told the story multiple times. I was at the Gamescom before the game releases, and they showcased that demo of Aliens Colonial Marines.
Yeah.
So I got to see that demo very close and personal.
The Aliens Colonial Marines, for those who don't recall, was the game that the Wii U version is the definitive version because it got canceled.
Yeah.
And it was a prime example of an entire trailer that was nothing but one giant bullshot.
You're not
Because
wrong.
the final game was, I believe I think that matter is still before the courts the last time I checked.
Yeah, it's still before the courts, yeah. It's still hashing it out.
And meanwhile, Randy Pitchford is off losing company secrets and other things in restaurants in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, allegedly.
All the time.
Yeah. And he claims it was magic, but yeah. Although nice to see that you can get bought off by Gearbox by getting a bunch of video games and swag.
Yeah.
And for those who don't know what we're talking about, I would recommend turning Safe Search on before you start Googling Randy Pitchford medieval times, because it can get a little nasty.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of the other announcements from PAX East were actually blown out in the Nindy showcase last week, but one that did not get announced in that was actually revealed the day before PAX East actually started. Is that Yacht Club Games finally revealed the first of their games that they are publishing, which is Cyber Shadow, a high octane 2D ninja side scroller that's drawing a lot of comparisons to The Messenger.
Hey, it's the year of the ninja now with that Katana Zero and the Messenger DLC.
Yeah, that's looking pretty interesting. There was no release date given for that, which I'm assuming is because a lot of the Shovel Knight a lot of the people that would normally be doing that are body down trying to get Shovel Knight out the door.
Yeah, the last two pieces of content. Yeah,
before we get into the final the final parts of that. So
it has been a long road. They're finally ending their development on Shovel Knight, it seems.
And then they can go on to Shovel Knight 64.
Hey,
although I think they need to do Shovel Knight World first, because get the 16-bit jump out of the way and then do 64.
I can see it. Sure.
Yeah. And at PAX East, Nintendo had the big tournaments for Splatoon 2 and Smash, which I didn't realize the Smash tournament was actually using Squad Strike as the format. So
yeah, the tournament set up for for basically the European Cup, which is also ongoing, and I've seen a few of those as well. Is they're doing squads, so they basically have 3 players. And you basically have to play well with each other and swap them out and decide your order between rounds and what have you. So it's it makes for a very interesting dynamic and very different from the usual one-on-one matches that we see in other tournaments. And I think it's really fun watching right now. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah. So those archives for the Splatoon 2 tournaments and the Smash tournament are on Nintendo's YouTube channel. And it turns out those were qualifiers for a world championship that will pit the US champions against Europe, Japan, and Australia. And that's going to be held on June 8th, which, if you don't have a calendar handy, that's the Saturday before E3 in Los Angeles.
Everybody be shocked.
Yeah.
No way no way that they did tours and tournaments all around the world for not having an ending to them.
Yeah. So they'll all be in LA before E3 to hand out that hardware. And Nintendo did put up their E3 page, and so far that is the only confirmed event. So we can assume that there's going to be, your usual digital showcase or Nintendo Direct or whatever they're going to call it this year.
I just think they're gonna keep calling it Nintendo Directs instead of the usual bullshit they call it every single year.
Yeah.
I
And
mean,
then
yeah.
the Treehouse Live, which I don't think either of us is going to be able to see. At least I won't, because I don't know about you, but I've got my plane tickets all booked. I'm going to E3.
I'm still not sure if I'm going to E3. I'm still considering. Here's the thing, and I've not really talked about much about this, but before E3, I'm actually going to Japan to Bit Summit.
Oh, so
Um,
that could be your big trip for the year.
yeah, but somebody who I know in Los Angeles said I could stay at his place.
Okay.
So I'm still looking into a plane ticket. If I can find it cheap enough, I'll likely still end up going to E3.
Okay.
But it is still sort of up into the air. So no, I won't be able to see Treehouse live either. If I will be, if I still be at home, I will. But for right now, where I'm pointing towards, I would say no.
Yeah. So that'll be so. But given that last year they gave up half of day one of Treehouse Live to devote to a Smash Brothers tournament.
Huh.
How many games do they have at E3 that they need to? It sounds like they need to do like wall-to-wall coverage for 3 days straight.
I think they have a lot more than last year for sure. Last year, I don't know if you agree with this. I felt that it had plenty of empty moments.
Yeah, and like they cut off incredibly early on day 3. It felt like the sort of interstitial times were longer than expected, and then again they were also debuting a game that came out like the next week in Mario Tennis,
Yeah,
which, well, this year Mario Maker might end up being that game for all we know.
for sure. And then they had to do a segment on Octo expansion and on what else on Torna. So they kind
Yeah.
of had to focus. They had to focus their shift around on some other stuff that aren't like main games. This year the situation seems a little bit different because before we now know going into E3, we know that around that time, that might be the week of or the week after, likely Mario Maker is coming out. Then we have
Right.
Fire Emblem, we have Astral Chain,
Daemon
and
Ex Machina.
Demon Ex Machina, and we're gonna assume like Animal Crossing, Luigi's Mansion, what have you, and what else?
And
Um,
Pokemon, and
and
that
Pokemon,
Pokemon
yeah.
at the end of the year.
So obviously they have a lot more in store for us this year, and I'm sure of it. There are a few more surprises, even if there are particularly small ones.
Right.
So I do feel that I have to take up more time actually by looking at games this year, because in comparison to last year, they actually have stuff to show us. Oh,
Sorry. Hay fever season. Hopefully you don't hear that in the audio version.
yes.
The So they've started their site. We're probably, if they've got that E3.Nintendo.com up and running for 2019 now, we can probably assume we're going to hear more of what they've got planned for the show probably in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, for sure. I'm also. This is on a side note. I'm surprised that we haven't heard a date about Mario Maker 2 yet, and I'm wondering if we'll hear anything this month about Mario Maker 2, because it seems around that time where they do have to say something, especially since other dates around it before and after already have dates.
Right. Because they've pretty much got up to E3 pretty solid in that they've got the Labo VR kit in a couple of weeks. And then they're going to be, I think, aside from that and Cadence of Zelda, that's like Mario Maker,
And
Cadence of Zelda,
Box
and
Boy.
Box Boy.
Yeah.
Yeah, which they've dated that, but we still don't have a price for it.
Only Japan has a date. It was about $10 in Japan.
Okay,
Yeah.
that sounds about fair.
Yeah.
But so, I mean, you could make the argument that they're ceding a lot of that to third parties, especially since the back half of April has about 400 hours worth of games that I want to play in it.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. But it does seem like we might be. I don't know how they will announce it. Maybe in a press release, maybe a direct mini or something. But either way, it would be weird if they not say anything about Mario Maker 2 at all.
Yeah, like we need a little bit more warning than announcement on the Tuesday, like on E3 Tuesday. It's out this Friday. Like
Yeah,
retailers would lose their minds if that happened.
pretty much. And I also feel like right now, for the first half at least, this is the biggest game that they have going still. Because you could make the argument for Level VR, but it's sort of a wait and see on that one. And
Yeah,
nothing really else outside of Yoshi that released this week isn't really particularly big. So the next big thing, first party wise, and they literally throw every single important game of them now in the latter half of this year, it seems.
yeah.
They need to kick off that ride, and I just wonder at what point they're just gonna say, here's when Mario Maker 2 is coming out, because that is the most important thing that we should focus on at the moment.
Yeah. And I mean, a worst case scenario is that they don't announce anything until end of April when they have their year-end earnings and they put out the report at that point. But that's still only if we assume that it's coming out somewhere around in that time frame around E3. That's only like 6 weeks worth of lead time to really get the marketing push going.
Yeah, and also in another way, it's also where, for example, talking about investors, we don't know what is, for example, going on with Mario Kart Tour, because it seems like that game has been in flux for so long now.
That it might get beat out by another Mario Universe mobile game
Yeah.
with the Dr. Mario game.
hmm We'll see what happens. It's a very interesting period. I think from end of spring, summer onward into the end of the year, it's going to be very packed with first party games. I just think we're now currently waiting on what's happening next.
Yeah. And do they have is there one last bullet in the chamber for 3DS, or are they just going to go out to the farm in the country starting with this fiscal year that we're coming into tomorrow?
I'm not surprised if they would do like a few more Nintendo Selects games, but I think the sun is setting on new games for 3DS.
Yeah, so Persona Q2 in June, and that's it.
Yeah, that seems like it. Yeah.
And I suppose this is as good a time as any to bring up the big rumor of the week report in the Wall Street Journal suggesting that there would be 2 Switch revisions this year. One, a smaller, more handheld focused Switch designed to replace the 3DS, and then another more core gamer focused Switch. Whether that means more power didn't seem to be immediately clear,
hmm
but those 2 apparently would both be coming this year.
From what I understand, and this is sort of lines up what Eurogamer has heard. It seems like the budget version seems to be made to be kid-proof and not have much interchangeable parts. So basically, instead of having separated parts like the Joy-Con and like the intercasing of what like the actual part of the Switch is concerned, it would just be one thing where they arrange the parts a bit more so they have more flex to them. And make sure that even if you drop it, it will be totally okay.
Yeah,
And then with the more core version, like their first thing in their mind is they need to get rid of all the security problems they have with the current model, because With the chip that you can lock into the rail, you can basically hack into the Switch, and that's not a good thing right now.
Ooh,
Um,
I didn't realize that was where the security holes were.
yeah, like the rails of the Switch have basically you would call a backstop. So they want to fix those insecurities, as well as making their internals maybe a little bit beefier, not by much, but by somewhat. To ensure that the people who are currently owning a Switch and are that savvy anyway, to have them move over to that Switch, so where they are safe again within Nintendo's bubble. So that's basically what they're thinking. It seems.
So, as somebody who would be theoretically interested in possibly getting both of these, do you think, and especially since I could probably I'd probably be in a situation where I could essentially trade a Switch for like $200 credit toward a new system.
Yeah.
Do you think is it easy to have an account running on two systems at once, such that the games are accessible now with Nintendo Switch Online?
Yeah. I've tried this multiple times. I have all my accounts on a secondary Switch here in the back. Um, and when somebody wants to play it here on the couch, I just let them and play something on one of the different accounts that I have, because um, if I go back on that account on the primary Switch, they will stop. Won't be able to access the game anymore. So you still have to. There is some flex between that, but if you're only using it on one singular Switch, it shouldn't be that huge of a problem, to be honest.
Yeah, and I think uh, I may forgive me if I'm misconstruing what Eurogamer was reporting here when they were backing up the journal's report, but it seemed like if there was going to be a power bump on this core focus Switch, it was going to be more like new 3DS to original as opposed to Xbox One X to Xbox One.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely going to be a power bump. I'm not so sure about it being gigantic anyway. It will be more stable in a whole bunch of areas, and will be able to do more battery consumption and focus on a lot more on the intricate parts of the backstop of the hardware. But I do think there will be a bump. But it seems only logical that way. But they can't do too much, because if the problem is if they go too hard, the problem would remain that some games would only work on one system, not another system, which they want to avoid. For example, with the 3DS and all the systems they've done before this.
Yeah.
So,
and even then, you still had games like Xenoblade, which were exclusive, or Hyrule Warriors, which probably should have been.
yeah. So I definitely think the bump will ensure that some games, maybe third-party ones, will only work better with the Switch Pro version. But we'll see. It seems like something, and I'm not sure if it will release this year. That's the only thing I'm sort of worried about. But we'll see. Like it still seems very early, and anything can happen in a year that already seems crazy for the second half.
Mm. I mean, I can definitely I think at least one of them has to launch this year, and I think it has to be the lighter one because you want to have something lighter and inexpensive in the market for Animal Crossing and Pokemon.
Oh, I
What
agree with that. Yeah, for sure.
But what do you really have that would take advantage of the power of a more powerful Switch, like Dragon Quest 11, maybe?
Yeah. I don't know. It would because, for example, when they first pitched the new 3DS in the Japanese Direct in August, what was it,
2014.
2014?
Yeah, because
They
it came out there in like November, and then it came out in the rest of the world in like February the following year.
Yeah, I think it came out in October, around 3DS Smash launch, around that time, a few weeks afterwards in Japan. Um, when they pitched it, they showcased it has a bit more power, so will run, for example, the eShop faster. They showcased Smash, so it would run like more decently on that current hardware. Um, and that's how they approach that. Like they need a pitch for something like that, and it needs to should be showcased with a game to say, from this is why you need this, and that's why you would want a better Switch.
Mm. Because I mean, Astral Chain aside, because that seems like something that could really push hardware, especially if you're letting Platinum get a hold of it.
Hmm.
But like, there's not really that huge, tentpole Nintendo game that would really push the hardware for that. I mean, theoretically, Metroid Prime 4 could have been that game, but we know what happened to Metroid Prime 4.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we'll have to wait and see what happens with that. But hopefully we'll find out more soon, possibly at E3. Who knows?
It would be very nice if it would, but who knows? I mean, I see an increasingly bigger role for Gamescom, so who knows,
Yeah, or because heck, Nintendo likes to make announcements right at the end of August anyway, in time for PAX East or PAX Prime. So
Yeah. We'll see. We'll see.
yeah. Or they could just do what they did in 2012, where like, oh, we have no plans to do a 3DS revision. 2 weeks later, here's the 3DS XL. It's coming out in August.
For us, it came out a month earlier because we're the good people. Hey.
Yeah. So PAX East wasn't the only big to do this weekend, as
Yes.
Sega had their Sega Festival in Japan, which the second day mostly featured guest lectures from the likes of Sagata Sanshiro.
Hey, my man.
But day one featured a bunch of announcements. Some of them directly Nintendo related, some of them indirectly. They announced the next group of Sega Ages games, which will include Fantasy Zone, a party game that I don't think ever got localized previously, and Herzog's Y with online play. So some
That
classic
is
art.
really fantastic. Like,
Yeah.
Herzog's Y is one of the early real-time strategy games in that genre, and I played it recently again. That game is still really good, to be honest.
Yeah,
Um,
and it was what, a 91 Genesis Mega Drive game?
yeah,
That seemed
yeah.
and it still holds up. That's amazing. So we'll get to see those over the next year. Although M2 is a little busy here, so the releases on the Sega Ages being a little slow can make
Hmm.
sense because they last year at the same event, Sega announced that they were doing their a Mega Drive Mini similar to the SNES Classic. And it turns out it was being done by the questionable quality folks at Games.
Uh,
So Sega later said, you know what, we're going to take this in house, and they brought it back out a year later. And this Mega Drive Mini / Genesis Mini, depending on your territory, will come out September 19th. It'll be about $80 US, 80 euros,
mhm.
and M2 is doing the emulation. The menu music is being written by Yuzo Koshiro,
Ah,
and it's going to have 40 games on it.
that all like I actually watched the stream of Sega Fest of the first day and second day a little bit. Um, and when I was watching the Mega Drive Mini stuff, I was just immediately blown away because um when they first announced this, it seemed in a very bad place because once again they were announced that Ad Games was doing it. The design seemed really cool, but we weren't really going anywhere. I think the good thing is that unlike Sony with their PlayStation Classic, Sega realizes what their strengths are, which they already had with M2, and knowing what they can do, especially from an emulation standpoint, um, and realizing the best things that they have, which is their backlog. Sega has a fantastic backlog of games, and they immediately went for the throat with the first 10 they announced, and another 30 is coming when we don't know what those are. But already knowing that, say, Sonic 2 and Gunstar Heroes are in that package, that is hacking cool. And I
And
can't wait for that.
and I mean, sure, you've got your Altered Beasts in there, but they're also doing one of the rarer Genesis games, a game that I've been interested in playing for several years now, but never really had a legal way of doing it. Castlevania Bloodlines is in the
Yeah,
first
yeah,
10.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Absolutely, yeah.
That's the Sega exclusive Castlevania game. I think it came out in what, 93. That is, yeah, that's going to be in this collection. And the fact that they are getting, like, they literally I don't know if it was M2 directly that said this, that there were so many games they wanted to put in, they couldn't bring themselves to cut them. So that's why this Genesis thing has almost 20 more games than the Super Nintendo Classic does.
But that's good, you know. Like really seems like they care, which is good because that's what you make a classic console for in the first place. Because Sega was notorious for keeping the Mega Drive or the Genesis around for a very long time. They loved that system and still do. Like if you go to Brazil, they still make like repros um till this very day. And it makes very much sense that they love that system to death, and it's very much part of their DNA. So putting all their eggs in that singular basket seems important to them, and I think it's really good that they're doing so. Really
Yeah.
good.
Yeah, like I was not a Sega kid growing up. Like mine was a Nintendo house, but I will likely pick this up.
Yeah,
Just even at $100 Canadian, that's still a really good deal because a legit Genesis that runs off HDMI and Bloodlines is going to cost a lot more than $900 Canadian, and I get
yeah.
39 other games with it. My
Europe,
own
yeah.
Yeah, the
Sorry.
only thing I don't really get on this is that the Mega Drive Mini for Europe and the Genesis Mini both are coming with 3-button controllers,
Yeah,
and the Japanese one has the 6-button pad.
yeah. I don't get that either. Like, I would have preferred like the 6 button pad in an instant. To be fair, there aren't that many games that use the 6 button controllers anyway. But it's nice. It would be nicer to have if they say, for example, include a fighting game.
Yeah, like if they put like if somehow, like, well, I mean, Street Fighter 2 is on the Super Nintendo Classic, so it wouldn't be out of the question to get like Super or Special Championship Edition on there, and at that point, you would basically need the 6-button pad.
Yeah, of
But
course.
that might only be on the Japanese version for all we know, or they're going to sell the controller separately. Who knows?
Yeah, because the bundle comes already with 2 3 button controllers in the box, which is very interesting. Very very interesting.
Yeah,
But yeah, Europe was very much Sega country until the Super Nintendo, and that was midway through the Super Nintendo because Nintendo of Europe didn't come about until the Super Nintendo because back in with the NES days, it was done by Hasbro, and by that point, the Master System and the Genesis, the Mega Drive, already took over in Europe. So Nintendo was very late in our region. So this was pretty much Sega country. So I used to play like the Mega Drive a lot back in the day. So I am pretty pumped about this.
yeah. And the final announcement out of Sega Fest is that Sega is the official game maker of the Olympics, as you've seen with the various Mario and Sonic
Yeah.
games over the years. They are bringing back Mario and Sonic, having skipped Pyeongchang, which I believe was due to Dr. Robotnik getting caught up in the Russian Federation suspension from the 2018 Olympics. They're coming back for the Tokyo Games, which that makes sense. Nintendo and Sega are both from Japan. And also we have our first mid 2020 game as the official Tokyo Olympic realistic game will be coming out on Switch as well. And they also announced like a Sonic at the Olympics for phones, and I think an arcade game as well.
Yeah, they announced 4 games. So once again, Mario Sonic Arcade, Sonic at Olympics Mobile, and the official game. An official game, and then Mario and Sonic are coming to Switch. This is the first official game. So it's separate from the Mario Sonic situation. This is the first official full-blown Olympic game since 2012.
Wow,
Because
I totally forgot that they skipped Rio with those. And
they skipped Sochi, they skipped Rio, and then Pyeongchang was done as part of Steep.
yeah,
This is the
so
first one since 12.
and I think this is the first official one. I honestly don't recall if there's ever been like an official Olympics game on a Nintendo system aside from like the Olympic hockey tournament from '98 on the N64, and that's because they
Oh
have the
yeah.
Wayne Gretzky engine.
This is the first one in an official game in a while, and that's coming to PlayStation 4, Xbox One and Switch. But it feels weird, because that last official game of London, just like Mario and Sonic, I think it's a very similar situation. Um, I really enjoyed London 2012 for both from a Sonic perspective and from a official perspective. I think those two games were like the highlight of what Sega Sports did. After that, especially with Mario and Sonic, with Ryu and Sachi, it went way off track, like not good enough at all. Like because with Mario and Sonic, they kept the controls very simple. You could use like the remote sideways, and you could use buttons, or you could use motion controls, whatever you liked. With the official game, they kept the controls relatively simple, but anyone could understand it, and most of the events could be played online. And I think the opportunity now, it seems very clear that they care more this time in the trailers than the last couple of years of what they've done with Mario and Sonic, for example. Um, what I've seen from like the official side is that they're kind of going back to the London structure where they kept their events relatively simple with the controls again. And then with Mario and Sonic, it seems that they are focusing on the more funness of those games, but for more special moves in most of the events. So I think it could be time for like really good Olympic games again. But I first want to see more first. But we'll see with Mario and Sonic later this year, I guess.
Yeah. And you mentioned the special moves. Thank you for helping me understand something in that trailer, because how the hell is Mario beating Sonic in a foot race?
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, that trailer was really good, and I think they're making good pitches for their games again. Which honestly, it feels like a long time. Like Sega made good sports games. Like the Mario, once again, London 2012 was like the last good solid Mario and Sonic game. I think Sochi and Rio weren't all that good, and it seems like they're going on the right track, especially with focusing on one system now with Mario and Sonic. So we'll see where it goes. We'll see where it goes.
Yeah, and I think although I think Mario and Sonic Rio, if you could find a copy of that for Wii U, it's pretty rare, so you may want to grab it just to say you have it, because I'm pretty sure it's already been delisted from the eShop.
Yeah, it has been. Yeah, so you need to have a physical copy of the game to even play it.
Yeah, and the same thing with the Sochi game as well, for if you're looking for those Winter Olympic action, because like we said, they skipped the 2018 games for whatever reason.
Yeah.
And one final brief thing here. I wish Zach was here to talk about this, because he's probably got more information than we do. But Shante 5 is happening.
Hey!
Was announced by WayForward on Monday,
Mhm.
coming to Switch later this year, along with PC, Xbox One, PlayStation 4, and the Apple Arcade, which I think is going to be the only way you can play that game well on a cell phone, because of the
Well,
weirdness on that.
Apple Arcade is tvOS, so Apple TV and iOS. So
Yeah. And
it's interesting to see, because I had this conversation with a friend earlier today because he asked about this. I'm not so sure what to think of Apple Arcade yet, because the two main things are: how do you want to work every single of those 100 games on tvOS and iOS, and two, um, how much of those games are actually going to be original to that service, because they focused and touted a lot, saying from, oh, all of those games that we are going to show you, especially for Apple Arcade, are going to be all new experiences that we're helping make with developers. But like you said, Shante is already coming to Switch and all those other platforms, so I already think that's a strike against it.
yeah, so yeah, for the Apple Arcade, basically a subscription service of indeterminate price that will give you access to games on Apple TV and iOS. I'm really worried about the revenue share, or the way they're doling out revenue on that service,
Yeah.
because it's centered around percentage of playtime. Like they're basically paying it off on the developers, based on how much time people spend playing their games.
Hmm.
So if what's the like, they say there's going to be no free to play stuff on there, but if I was a developer who wanted to maximize his return on that, I'd be looking for a way to make those games addictive as all hell, to try and get more money out of it.
No, you're not wrong. You're absolutely not wrong.
Yeah.
But
So
yeah, Shante, it's getting a new game. Hopefully, it's a bit more Pirate Curse and less Half Genie Hero. Don't get me
yeah,
wrong. I think Half Genie Hero was a really fun game, really fun from beginning to end. But I love the momentum and moment-to-moment gameplay of Pirate Curse.
yeah. And like the few screenshots that we got from it, granted this was based off the Apple Arcade version, it seemed to be it seemed like Half Genie Hero art style, but but seemed more Pirate Curse gameplay. At least that was the impression that a lot of people were getting. So
Okay,
best
yeah,
best of
that's
both
good.
worlds on that.
Yeah, that's very good.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, so that's the weekend news. Thank you very much for watching and listening. Again, sorry for the cold, but spring has sprung here, unfortunately, and not much I can do about that. Yeah. So, Don, where can people follow you on the internet?
You can find me at Nintendon't and this on Twitter. That's NINTNDAAN. Usually talk about games, not much else. I've been mostly just busy with stuff all over the place, so I don't really talk too much on social media, mostly because I've been busy with like rebranding my personal channel and doing once again stuff for NWR and other places. So if you want to have more actual video game discourse, I would also go to eShop Action, where I do the eShop Action Committee Summer of Jordan, and also post about an eShop game, a good eShop game, every single day.
Absolutely, we're definitely worth following because you often bring up games that I completely forgot existed. That's what you're there for.
Yeah, exactly.
Because when there's 35 games a week, you have to lose track of a few.
Yeah, basically, pretty much. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm on Twitter at NWR Donald. Follow me for your latest hot takes on Pokemon Gold and Silver and some special calling out of when I can pull off a good alliteration in a news post.
And don't bring up Languisser 3DS.
I'm recasting that one scene from Harry Potter in my head. Fail and you can go to Longresser after Three Houses comes out.
It will be all fine when Free Houses comes out, right?
Yeah,
I
let's hope so. And I hope we get 3 review copies for that game because there's a lot of people that want to play that.
I already get a review copy, so I'm good.
Yeah, I might have to do some. I might see if I can run into some Nintendo of Canada folks at E3. I think they probably use NOA's review codes, but hey, it's worth a shot, right?
Yeah, it's worth a shot.
Yeah. For the site, patreon.com/NWR. Support the site that supports us. NintendoWorldReport.com, of course, for all of our reviews and other content. Like, subscribe, hit the notification bell on the YouTube channel, and hit always because YouTube's algorithm is about as useful as a Minus Attack Merrick and Fire Emblem Heroes. And that's our show. Thanks very much. We will talk to you later this week. Bye bye.
Bye, everyone.